When did the class clown take it too far? Story 1. I knew a guy, a high school student in the late 60s. He and his best friend were very close but had also dated the same girl. My buddy dated this girl first, now the friend was dating her. No problems, but they both understood how this could be perceived as a potential friendship ender. They had a joke all planned out. The best friend grabbed some ketchup packs from a fast food restaurant, and after lunch he was sitting in class with the packets torn slightly, tucked unnoticeably in his hand. My buddy had the starter pistol from his track and field team. You see where this is going. My buddy ran into the classroom and shouted, "You can't steal my girl from me! If I can't have her, no one can!" And he fired the starter pistol, filled with blanks, not bullets, in the direction of his best friend. The friend who had jumped up from his desk during the shouting clutched his chest from the fake bullet wound, sending horrifying streaks of red ketchup flying all over his white shirt. He collapsed. The look of horror on the face of every student in the room, my buddy said, was amazing. He and his best friend both got detention. Sometimes I think about this story and I wonder what could have happened if high school students tried this in a post-Columbine world. It's crazy how much time changes in just a couple of generations. Story 2. Straight up just peed on the floor in the middle of class and convinced the teacher that it was spilled water, so he cleaned it up. Honestly, not even class clown stuff at that point, just being a gross dick. He didn't get in nearly enough trouble. We had this one kid in our class in high school. I don't want to call him weird, and I'm genuinely not sure if he had a disorder, but he spoke with a lisp and didn't seem to have many friends. Our interactions were few and, well, weird for a lack of a better word. I don't mean the offensive weird, just the objective not normal. The only vivid memory I have of him is being 2 seats away from him being asleep in class and hearing a little sputtering noise, and then seeing his desk coated with water. The kid between us goes, Did you just throw up on your desk?" He responds with, "No, it's just water." And then we just went about our day like nothing ever happened, never wiped it up, never questioned it, and just continued learning about whatever stuff we were learning about in class. Story 3. When I was in 3rd grade, we were all doing our thing, coloring, reading, etc., and the class clown was being really noisy and just kept goofing off. We were all having fun, and the class clown eventually sat down. It wasn't long before he was laying on the floor, foaming out of his mouth and shaking violently. We all laughed. It was a joke, right? Before long, the teacher came rushing over to see the new joke the kid came up with. She immediately called 911 and he was rushed out of the room. He had a seizure while the whole class thought he was joking. He recovered and everything and was fine. I just feel bad for the kid. Story 4. My friend decided to shove his hands into my back pockets and grab my ass. Wasn't wearing a belt. Ended up pantsing me straight to the floor, and I was wearing spandex-type underwear at the time. But he caught those on the way down too, and ended up pulling it down to where my just sprung out of them. What was bad became worse as our track coach had just walked in looking for me and she got the full frontal. Not to mention the class saw everything as well as I tried to pull my pants up, only to realize my dick was out on full display. Didn't even get detention, shaking my head. Story 5. Kid in my band class still thought Yo Mama jokes were funny. We came to school for the first time after Hurricane Sandy, and the kid goes to the teachers, "Yo Mama's," and the teacher cuts him off, dead in the hurricane. The kid never told another one of those jokes in that class. Story 6. There was a class clown in my class and another one from the senior class at the time. They'd collaborate to throw toilet paper all over the schoolyard as a joke. I forgot exactly what it was, but there was some kind of very important event going on that day, and we were supposed to have a lot of visitors that afternoon. The principal was not amused. He said if they had done that on any other day, he'd probably just let it go after making them clean it up. But they got detention, and one of the teachers made them personally apologize to the elderly janitor who had to clean up that mess in the dark when it was freezing cold. The janitor found the mess when he had gotten to school that morning while it was still dark around 6 a.m. or so. He started cleaning it up himself before anyone knew who did it. The officer pulled the footage from the outside security camera later that morning. Because it was such a small school, those dudes were identified in about 30 seconds. Story 7. My roommate was a class clown type. We had both been out of school for years at that point. One day, I spent the entire day making syrup. It's a long process of letting the ingredients simmer down for hours, but it's a labor of love and I was willing to do it. After I finished the syrup, I put it in the fridge to cool down while I got a shower. For some freaking reason, my roommate decides to pour a bunch of hot sauce in my syrup, ruining the whole pot and wasting my entire day. He didn't understand why I didn't find it funny and got pissed when I got mad. He was a jerk. Story 8. I had my moments of class clownery. The only one I really regret all these years later was from middle school. My science teacher was telling us about dealing with bullies. Back in his day, some punks were messing with him and his friends and he confronted him. At some point in the exchange, he said something like, "Come at me anytime, I'm not hard to find." No, I'm paraphrasing. For some reason, my dumb brain thought, not hard to find, easy to spot, so large that you can see him from anywhere. Looking for a laugh, I spoke up and I said, "Why, were you fat?" There was some muffled laughter, but all I really remember was the teacher stopping almost mid-sentence, staring daggers at me, face red as hell. He stopped his story, turned to his desk, and told us curtly to just work on homework. He barely said anything for the rest of class. I felt like absolute crap. It didn't register to me that, yeah, maybe he struggled with his weight as a kid and that was part of the bullying. I really didn't imagine that he was a fat kid or anything, and it was just a play on the easy-to-find mental image. Ah, crap. I apologized as best as I could at the end of class, but it was tense. At the end of the year, he actually awarded me a Best Science Student Award or something like that. You know how they'll do a bunch of student awards for attendance and other crap? I think the fact that he did that means he forgave me. But I still feel like a massive heel every time I think about that. Story 9. Junior year in high school in Algebra 2, the teacher was kind of a douche, so this one guy, let's call him Mike, would give him a hard time. This was a regular thing, and Mike would get kicked out of class for saying or doing some inappropriate stuff, but we all thought it was hilarious. One day, our teacher didn't show up to class. Word got around that his oldest son had died of a drug overdose, and that he had to take some personal time off. He didn't show back up until a week later, and he looked really sullen and down. During class, Mike pulled out a can of Coca-Cola and started sipping at it nonchalantly. The teacher had a strict no eating or drinking in class policy, and Mike was aware of this. He told Mike to throw it away and step outside. Mike, the absolute freaking savage, says, "Look, I know you didn't like Coke, but I'm sure your son did." Nobody laughed. Just silence. Some people didn't get it. The other ones who did were just too shocked to say anything, like me. Mike threw his drink away and walked out of the class, while the teacher just sort of haphazardly continued his lesson, although we could tell that Mike's comment messed him up. Story 10. I tripped a kid who was running for lunch back when I was in high school. He didn't get back up. Thought he'd broken his leg. The ambulance was called and the kid was taken away with a full view of well over 1,000 plus. I got called out quite redly for the I'd been, and then thankfully comforted by the same kids when I became distraught at the thought of what I'd done to that poor kid. After a rather sleepless and guilt-ridden night, I found out that he had a dead leg and was fine. 30 years later, and I still freak out over what 14-year-old me did. I am so sorry, Tristan. Hey guys, are you enjoying the video? If so, please drop a like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel and it means a lot. Anyway, back to the stories. Story 11. There was a story here in the UK not so long ago about a kid who was messing around in the class and flicking bits of food at people. He threw a bit of cheese at this one kid who turned out to have severe allergies and ended up going into anaphylactic shock. The school mishandled it quite a bit and the poor kid ended up dying. Not sure if this is exactly a case of the class clown taking it too far, as he wasn't to know, but the consequences were dire even so. Story 12. I was at an all-state music festival, basically a concert band that students from the entire state auditioned to perform in during high school. And during some of the downtime between pieces during the rehearsal, the conductor asked me if anyone wanted to come up and say a joke into the mic. One of the percussionists raised his hand, walks up, and tells the following joke. "What do you call a kid with no friends? A Sandy Hook survivor." I absolutely could not believe what I heard. This was just weeks or maybe a few months after the shooting. I don't remember if anyone laughed, I don't think they did, and he definitely got a stern talking to. Story 13. My sophomore year of high school. It was an English class and there was 4 class clowns in the same class. The second semester of school, so it was shortly after I'd been switched from one teacher's class into the new one. During the first semester, there was a student a grade below us that had committed suicide, and a year before that, my cousin had done the same. The teacher walked out of the classroom to take something to get printed or something and left the only senior in the class in charge. Both she and I were close to the deceased freshman's family and had struggled with his death together. Not a minute after the teacher left, two of the clowns got up and went over to the windows, grabbed the pull string to the blinds, and used it as a noose to hang themselves. Some kids laughed and some kids told them to knock it off, and a few just wanted to finish their worksheets, but I had to leave the classroom and I passed the teacher in the hall. She saw I was crying and asked what happened. I was trying to explain while sobbing when the senior came out after chewing the clowns a new one and explained to the teacher what had happened. She actually escorted everyone except the class clowns out of the classroom so she wouldn't disturb the other classes around us with how much and how loudly she yelled at them. Story 14. In my English class, we all tried to be class clowns most of the time. However, the one time my friend took it too far was when at the end of class, the teacher would go around picking up all the textbooks from each table while we stood waiting. When the teacher came around to collect his textbook, she lifted it up and my friend had unzipped his trousers and put his wanger through it and hidden it under the book. She screamed and everyone else was so shocked at the sight of him, standing there with his wanger flopped out on the table. But before anyone else could say anything, he looks down and pretends to scream and fret as well, as if he didn't know what he was looking at. As he lifts his arm up and proceeds to karate chop his own penis in front of the teacher and my entire class. The lad got excluded for the day and got put in a new English class. Excuse me, but why? Story 15. The teacher was one of the nicest guys I had ever met, really upbeat and always wanting to help out. His son wound up getting bullied a lot and committed suicide. When he came back, our class clown made a really bad joke or remark about how it was the teacher's fault that his son killed himself. Our teacher got up, walked over to the other kid's desk, and stopped. The kid tried to make another jab, but the guy pulled the kid out of his seat and started pummeling him and throwing him against anything he could. Nobody in the class moved. We just watched as it happened and saw the snarky kid sobbing, bleeding, and just getting destroyed. Our teacher stopped, walked out of the room, and we never saw him again. Apparently, there were a bunch of lawsuits and the kid had to go to a hospital for a bunch of wounds. But it was definitely the most intense class I've ever been a part of. Story 16. There's this kid in class that is struggling financially in life. He's a kind kid though, and we hang out sometimes and we're really kinda close. Let's call this kid Francis. One day it was raining really hard and Francis rarely goes to school when the weather is bad because he couldn't afford to commute by public transportation and his family didn't own any vehicles. Plus, it was January, so when he did get to school on that rainy day, I was surprised. He walked all the way here with an umbrella. The day went by and it's almost over. The weather was still rainy and we were about to go. We were chatting and laughing and we failed to expect all the holes all over Francis's umbrella. The class clown, let's call him Martin, laughed, pointing at Francis. Francis was a small 4 foot 8 inches in height kid in the 8th grade. And Martin would always bully him for that, which seems funny to him but isn't for the class. And for Francis. But this time what Martin did to Francis made Francis cry. He explained to me that his umbrella had been something that his family got for free last Christmas. The fact that Francis is barely getting by and has a valuable item destroyed made me furious. But I didn't want to say anything because Francis told me not to tell the teacher. Although the next day, the teacher addressed an issue about someone's umbrella getting broken. Francis was totally silent and Martin was looking away, and the whole class speculated that Martin did it, and the teacher confirmed it. Martin was called for detention and asked if he would buy Francis a new umbrella, and had to do charity work for a week. Story 17. He wasn't that class clown, but we were in theater and a kid with some mental disorder asked a guy if he liked gay or lesbian people in a presentation. I had never seen a room go so quiet. Then the next morning, the teacher had a talk with everyone about how some things were not okay to say in class. To be honest, that class was really bad. This isn't a part of the question, but we had a guy punch a girl because she came out in front of the class. Story 18. Had a friend in high school who would always invite me to his parties. He was a popular guy on the wrestling team and I was not, so he's always trying to hook me up with chicks. Anyway, I went to a few of the parties and each was crazier than the next. The final one he had was insane, hundreds of people. Went upstairs to check on him because he had a lot to drink. Past the bathroom where some guys were popping Molly and then went to his room. As I was about to knock, he opens the door, looks me dead in the eyes and says, "I just got f***ed in the ass," with the most pale and wild expression. Instantly, I ask him if he's okay. A split second later, he flips his mind and expression to be the charismatic jock that he is. The other guy was another ladies' man jock on the football team. He came up to me a few days later and laughed it off like it was a joke and was like, "Oh, what happened at the party stays at the party." Just clowning around, I guess. Both are now happily married to women. I can only imagine how they initiated that. Story 19. The first year of middle school, we met the class clown, a funny little white freak. Was the most entertaining part of school for us, and he usually pushed the boundaries, and that's why people liked him and found him as a funny character, because he went overboard and it was always a blast. But one time I remember it like it was yesterday. He hatched a plan for everyone to hide in the classroom from the teacher. We followed, all hiding. The problem was the roll was done every 40 minutes to prevent wagging. The teacher came and freaked the hell out, ran to the headmaster's office, and the whole school went into lockdown. We didn't know it was because of us, so we stayed hidden for an hour. All of our parents were sent lengthy emails regarding our little prank. We agreed not to dob on the class clown, but some jackass spilled the beans and he got suspended. And when he came back, he wasn't quite the same class clown that he was, and we all missed him. We still talk about this to this day, and it's often the first topic we go to when we catch up every now and then. Story 20. The class clown made fun of a teacher's deceased uncle and made them cry. This is all a true story, by the way. There was a class clown who made pretty good jokes and is all around a respected person. They recently have been dropping roasts on people in their jokes, so people are starting to dislike them. The one thing they would usually say to ruin everyone's aspect was making fun of the teacher. Usually people would find it funnier because it's somebody a general doesn't like to begin with, but this was way too far. The teacher was asked if he was a Cubs fan, and she said that she is because her dead uncle, who is the nicest person ever that she met, was a die-hard Cubs fan. The class clown then exclaimed he was such a die-hard fan that he died hard. This was so bad that the teacher started crying and dismissed us early so that she could get better. Story 21. I was in 3rd grade. My best friend and I were in the same homeroom, but our teacher was an old, strict woman. At the beginning of the year, she went student by student asking them questions to get to know us. She asked us what was our favorite cereal and this and that, and then she asked our favorite cartoon or comic strip. She got to me and I said as if learning disabled, "Charlie Brown penis." My friend cracked up. She paused and said, "You mean peanuts with Charlie Brown and Snoopy?" I replied, "No." She asked, "What do you mean, no?" I said, "Charlie Brown penis." She grabbed me by the ear, pulled me to the hallway, and whipped me with a ruler. Back when teachers got away with it. Just to make my best friend laugh. I guess I deserved it. Story 22. In 8th grade, 2 kids in my health class were supposed to do a presentation on something, probably a health-related topic, and instead they reenacted that knife fight at the end of Saving Private Ryan. They knew the script and they made the sound effects, the whole 9 yards. They refused to stop. The teacher was screaming at the top of her lungs, begging for them to stop, but they just continued. She ran to the phone to call the office and was in tears trying to explain the situation. The class was completely out of control, laughing hysterically. It actually ended kinda serious though. The office lady heard knife fight and the whole school went into lockdown, and the school resource officer came in and took them both away. I'm assuming they got at least a detention. Story 23. This one kid thought that it would be funny to snort a line of that sour powder. This was no small line, mind you. I actually think that he was rubbing it off the candy. Anyways, he does his line and immediately starts screaming. His nose was gushing blood, and I honestly think he popped a blood vessel in his eye. Ran out of the room and later saw an ambulance come to the school. Don't do drugs. Story 24. I had this teacher that I hated in my elementary school art class. Maybe 4th grade. I discovered this magical art called backwards farting, where you would basically rapidly open and close your a-hole to create a sort of vacuum suction. Think one of those pipettes that you used in chemistry, except the chemicals were air and the pipette was my asshole. From here, you could create an infinite loop of farts. So there I was in class, sitting with my table of friends, coloring a picture of a lion, just toot-tooting away with my iPads. Me and my friend just laughing our freaking asses off at the pinnacle of all comedy. One kid just sort of offhandedly says, mid-laughter, "Oh my god, dude, stop." The teacher, who hated me, basically grabs my arm, pulls me out of my desk, and drags me out into the hallway with the door wide open. She then asks me, "Do you need to use the restroom?" not knowing my secret X-Man ability. The next day, this kid I hated was with a bunch of girls and said, yeah, the teacher pulled him out and asked him if he crapped himself. I didn't crap myself. Story 25. Old Gary. Well, he always used to tease this gay kid and everyone dared him to kiss him, as a dare. And the freak is still running the joke today, even got married to him. Gary knows how to do the long haul when he takes things too far. Can't wait for the big joke reveal and everyone to laugh. Classic Gary, doesn't know when to quit.